All right, good evening, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's time once again. Let's talk metal. Tonight, I'm digging back into the box of weird, obscure singles from American heavy metal bands throughout the 1980s and even creeping into the 1990s tonight, just a little bit. The singles I've pulled out tonight have something in common in that they don't necessarily look like heavy metal singles. If you were just flipping through a box of records, at a record show or your local store, you might not even stop and look at these for very long. They kind of look like they might just be generic rock or even, dare I say, the G word, glam metal bands. So yeah, they kind of give off the wrong vibe. However, they have pretty solid music on them. They're a bit heavier than they first appear. So, as kind of a public service to all of those of you out there digging hard in the wild, looking for these unfound gems, I'm going to show a few of these off tonight so that if you ever encounter them, excuse me, you'll know not to flip right past them, but instead pull them out, set them aside, and maybe give them a fair chance. All right. Our first one up tonight is a band from Miami, Florida called ROXX, R-O-X-X. This is their one and only single from 1983. And yeah, right away when you look at this, this is not a denim and leather kind of crew. This isn't Kronos and the guys, standing around in water with hatchets, hailing Satan and stuff like that. These guys look like they're trying out for extras in Miami Vice or something. So yeah, this one would not catch the eye of many serious headbangers, but let's go to the tape and see what it sounds like. I'm going to play a clip from the track Shout by ROXX. All right, so yeah, ROXX playing Shout off their only release, a single from 1983. A lot heavier than it looks like. That's a pretty solid metal track for 1983. The flip side, Imitations of You, also isn't bad. It's not as forceful as Shout is, but it's still a decent, passable enough track. So whatever happened to ROXX? I don't know. They kind of disappear and not much else is printed about them. There is one connection to a later band. The guitarist, listed as Yul Vaz, short for Vasquez, did show up at the end of the 1980s in another Florida band called Diving for Pearls, which I happen to have the CD of. Diving for Pearls got just a little bit of airplay on MTV around 1989, 1990. I'm pretty sure it was the track Gimme Your Good Lovin'. Wasn't a huge splash, but I saw the video and kind of liked the track. With Diving for Pearls, it's definitely at the lighter end of the hair metal spectrum, leaning more into just, straightforward rock music a little bit. But I kind of like it for what it is. It's very lightweight stuff. but it's not bad. And Vasquez shows back up as the guitarist in this band. Diving for Pearls, the video didn't get played a whole lot of times. It was not a major hit or anything like that, but I caught it enough times that I liked it and have picked up the album. This band didn't really go on to fame and fortune either. Naming yourself Diving for Pearls probably didn't help their cause any. It's a slang term for oral sex, and at least at that time, it was associated in particular with gay culture of men giving each other oral sex, which in the late 80s, naming your band that and hoping to become big, it probably was not going to work out well for you. But it is a nice album if you like that sort of lighter stuff, maybe getting a little bit towards like, the Aldo Nova side of hair metal music. But yeah, so the ROXX single, getting back to that one from 83, it's a decent little piece. Does not show up very often. It can take a while to find copies. It sometimes gets listed relatively expensive, but it doesn't always sell for a high price. This is not something to run out and pay a huge amount for just because you may see it listed with like a buy it now over $100. This can be found cheaper than that. It's the kind of thing that if you wait, the seller's probably going to have to come down on the price some. It's also the kind of thing that will get listed under just rock or glam metal, things like that. And when it has those kind of tags on it, the bids and such are not exactly going to roll in. So that, again, you may be able to snipe a copy on eBay for a fairly low price if it gets listed in those categories. But yeah, decent single. Don't let the picture sleeve throw you off. I like the ROXX one just fine. Okay, moving on to candidate number 2 this evening. This is a band out of Denver, Colorado that also just did one single. They're called Dead Silence. And they actually went to the trouble of giving their single a title. The Long Silence is Over, which, okay, not something you see a lot of bands do with a single. Neither track is entitled that. This pairs the tracks Can't Stop and Dead Serious. So again, picture sleeve, very plain looking, nothing much to go on here. Name's pretty generic. The pictures on the back, yeah, this is one where it's going to be maybe a little bit of a coin flip. They look a hell of a lot heavier than ROXX, but is this going to be serious heavy metal? Is it going to be 4 guys really just hoping to get some local radio play and show up at all the backyard keggers in the greater Denver area in 1984? Well, let's check out a clip and see what we've got. So I'm going to go with a clip of the track Can't Stop and see what Dead Silence sounds like. All right, so yeah, Dead Silence rocking out there a bit. 1984's Can't Stop. Really strong tune. I like it quite a bit. Nice vocal performance, decent guitar licks in the background. What more could you want from a small metal band in 1984? This is pre-thrash, pre-death, pre-glam. This is when heavy metal is more straightforward, and this band does just fine. I like the tune quite a bit. The flip side, Dead Serious isn't quite as good. It's a little slower. It's got a little weirder structure to it. Not an awful song, but Can't Stop is definitely the winner of these 2 tracks. Not a whole lot else to say about Dead Silence either. None of the band members seem to have gone on to other projects. The only other recordings I've seen listed online is that they did sort of like a digital anthology around 2010, 2011. So I guess they had other demos and stuff available. And I know that the band had been approached by a small record label sometime probably in the late 90s or early 2000s. I don't know the exact time frame, but I talked to the owner of the label years ago, and the label, is no longer putting stuff out. But he told me of all the bands that, he talked to that had some demos and, he tried to negotiate with and just never could quite get the pieces to line up. He said this was the one band that he really wished he could have put out some material by, because the demos he had heard from them that never got released, he said it was fantastic stuff, really good. So yeah, that digital release they did might be worth trying to track down and see what other tracks they had on there. Very unassuming picture sleeve. Band pictures leave you a little bit, it's going to be a coin flip maybe, but yeah, if you know what you're looking for, pick that one up. Can't Stop is a good track. It's one that doesn't show up all that often, but it also doesn't command a real high price tag. No, you're probably not going to get it for $5 or $10, but you're not going to have to pay, hundreds of dollars to get a copy of it either. So, Dead Silence out of Colorado. Okay, on to entry number 3 this evening. This one, now we're moving up to 1990. So actually the 80s are technically over, but metal lived on for a few years in the US before it got sort of completely overrun with grunge and stuff like that. And these next 2 singles have something a little bit in common. Both of these bands are operating in a real weird in-between niche. They look kind of glam, but they're a bit heavier than your typical, Poison or Winger or Warrant type of, hair glam metal band. At the same time, they're not really heavy enough to put in like the traditional heavy metal category with, your Iron Maidens and Judas Priests or anything like that either. They're somewhere right in between. I've never really heard a name for this particular little subgenre or niche. I guess the band that best exemplifies the style is Wasp, although these bands, they're not quite as over the top and theatrical as Wasp, but I think that's kind of what they were aiming for. So we're going to call them sort of maybe, Wasp-like metal. And the first of the 2 is by a band called the Rod Squad. So yeah, once again, everything you see about this makes you sort of flinch. It's just like, oh, that's a rough name a little bit. And it's got the big lipstick smear, and yeah, the high heel. It's just like, this is sounding like it's going to be kind of, some kind of sleazy glam outing, probably. What are we getting into? Band picture. Yeah, this doesn't look like the heaviest of crew. These guys look like they might have been angling for some airplay on MTV or something. So, it's a Southern California band. Is this just another part of the LA glam scene? Well, let's hop over here and check some stuff out. I'm going to go with a clip of, let's do Die Hard. Now, obviously not a Venom cover, but yeah, let's check out a clip of Die Hard and see what the Rod Squad sounds like. right, you're not expecting to be quite that aggressive just by looking at the picture sleeve. Um, is it a fluke? Is the other side just hairspray goodness or badness, depending on your point of view? Well, let's check it out. The flip side is called body heater. Let's see what body heater sounds like. So yeah, this has some crunch to it. This has a little bit of bite. Yes, it's got at least most of 1 foot in a little bit of sort of glam sleaze territory, but it's delivering it with a fair bit of oomph. This is not Bret Michaels wearing a cowboy hat singing "Every Rose Has a Thorn." God help me if I ever hear that song again. Not a happy place. Rod Squad delivering the goods on that. Both tracks are pretty solid. Just a couple of other things to note about Rod Squad. No other releases, not much about the band to report on. The drummer is, and sorry, let me double check and get the name right here. Checking all my bells and whistles here. But yeah, the drummer for Rod Squad was Dean Roberts, who had played in Leatherwolf, who's always had a bit of a following. So other than that, though, not much else to report about Rod Squad. Another great example of a single that just looking at it, you'd probably back away slowly and not try to make any more eye contact because you'd be afraid some of your buddies might see you looking at the single and accuse you of being a Kip Winger fan. But the tracks on that one are pretty damn good. It's much closer to Wasp than Winger. Last thing to note, this is another one that will often get listed as glam, and as such, it can be found for a reasonable price sometimes. Doesn't show up all that often, but don't overpay for it. If you get interested and want to find a copy, don't jump on the first copy you see. If it's listed as, ultra rare, one of a kind, blah, 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 give us your entire wallet. No, you don't have to do that. If you're patient, you can probably find it for a more reasonable price. There's a copy listed on Discogs at the moment. I noticed that's about $16. That does not come with the picture sleeve. And that is something else to be real mindful of. Your collector public service announcement for the evening. Whenever you're looking at things like completed auctions on a site like PopPsych, or you're looking at median prices and things like that on Discogs, always dig in a little deeper and see what condition those sold copies were in. $15 looks absolutely great for a copy of Rod Squad. I'll pay $15 for a second copy of it right now and give it to somebody in VCLT love fashion. But without the picture sleeve, yeah, that explains why it's so cheap. You'll see this happen sometimes with other records too, where they may have the cover with them, but if you check the condition, it turns out that it was graded as like poor. The cover was, really screwed up with water damage, and the record is scratched and warped and things like that. So you have to be mindful of the condition of the record. You can't just look at Pop Psych and say, oh, this sold for $200 once. I guess it's worth $200. What condition was that in? Was that like a sealed copy that had never been opened? Was it an average copy? Was it a copy missing inserts, or maybe it had the rare insults? Always check things out. Don't just look at the number and assume you know everything about the value of a record. Okay, enough of the collector side talk there. Let's get on to our fourth and last band of the night. This is a group out of Houston, Texas called DT ROXX. So we started with ROXX, and we're going to end with ROXX, although these are DT ROXX. So do they have anything in common? I don't think so, really. But yeah, this is another one that you look at this picture sleeve and you're just like, I don't know what this is. Is this metal? Is this pop? Is this just some random college band? I don't know. Well, there's no pictures on the back to help you decode it. All you have to go on are the song's titles, Conversation Piece and Gangbang. So the second one's like, okay, that could go in a lot of different directions. Conversation Piece, that also could go in a lot of directions. So what the heck are we looking at here? Well, let's go to the tape and find out. Let's hop back over here and yeah, let's just go ahead with the obvious choice and see what Gangbang sounds like. Okay, there you go. DT ROXX kind of grinding it out. Again, got that same kind of coarse, gravelly, gruff delivery, a little bit similar to what we heard on Rod Squad. Again, it falls somewhere in that Wasp category. I'm not going to call it, the next best thing compared to Judas Priest, but it's definitely a hell of a lot heavier than your late 80s Def Leppard or those kind of associated bands. So what's the flip side sound like? Well, what the heck? Let's check it out. How many times are you going to get to hear both sides of DT ROXX? So let's try out Conversation Piece. All right, Conversation Piece. Yeah, that one's obviously leaning a bit more into that sleazy side of glam. Yeah, but again, they're delivering it with a fair amount of heaviness and conviction, much more so than you would typically get from something like LA Guns, for example. So DT ROXX, spoiler alert, did not go on to conquer the world and become the next big thing on MTV. They kind of disappeared into the history books. They have a little historical footnote with a connection to a previous band. A couple of guys in DT ROXX had formerly played in a band out of Houston called Black Star. Now, who were Black Star? They had a track on a compilation album called Iron Tyrants back in 1984. And just so happens, I've got a picture of him, because who doesn't have a picture of Black Star laying around? This is the guys back in 1984. I love the dude here in the center. I hope this is one of the guys from ROXX. I'm not sure which one this is, but that guy, that pose, that look, he just says, I want to fuck you up with fashion. It's a great picture from the period. Black Star also didn't really have a whole lot of recorded output, but yeah, two of the members showed back up in the ranks of ROXX. They took one more shot at the brass ring, completely missed the brass ring, didn't even come within 3 feet of the brass ring, but they did leave behind this one pretty obscure single that is a pretty solid listen, in my opinion. Very much like the other ones, it does not show up very often, and when it does, sometimes people are trying to charge a high price for it. Every now and then somebody will pay a high price for it, but a lot of the time it will also get put into just like, the glam bin or the rock bin rather than the heavy metal bin. And as such, sometimes it can slip through the cracks and you can get it for a much lower price. All right, that is tonight's video. We've looked at 4 pretty cool singles that, well, they don't look pretty cool, but once you hear them, they do sound pretty cool. So once again, like your mother always told you, don't judge a book by its cover. You got to hear what's between the grooves before you pass judgment on a record sometimes. Now let's talk metal in the comments down below. What are some of your favorite releases that fall into this pattern of having a cover that makes you think it's going to be really lame? I don't mean bad cover art. I'm just talking the cover art definitely makes you think that, oh, this is going to be some kind of, wimpy AOR, weird prog experiment or something. But then once you press play and check or drop the needle on it, you realize, oh, wow, this is actually decent. It's got some pretty heavy grooves to it. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what fun things you've discovered where looks can be a little deceiving. All right, let's wrap this one up for tonight. So until next time, everybody take care. And as always, keep banging your head.